So we're going to get started. We have a lot to cover in this 50 minutes. Thanks so much. I'm really excited to see everyone. And the first of our faculty-led workshops for this year, sponsored by Academic Outreach and Innovation, the Provost's Office, and the Teaching Academy. So I'm going to turn this over to Mike Caulfield on the Vancouver campus. He'll be facilitating the conversation, has a number of faculty from Vancouver who've adopted some open source resources, and then we have Fred Giedis and Brian Collins from physics on this campus who've also adopted an open source resource. And Talia Anderson is in the striped sweater right here. She's from the libraries and has some open source samples. The library has. You want to look at hard copies of text, so take it away, Michael.
For example, we have a print textbook, which I was going to bring up here, but I appear to have forgotten, for psychology, printed out, hard copy. I see over there, there's some OpenStax materials. That's a chemistry book, which I believe is either $52 or $58. It's a hardcover book, and and you can go and you can look at these materials, and you might actually be paying some small amount of money for these materials. What actually distinguishes these materials from other materials is, again, that licensing. So, for example,
there's no audio.
There's no audio.
We can't hear anything. We can see you talking, but we can't hear it.
You can't hear it on the live stream?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay. You kind of need the audio. Oh, okay. It's caught up. All right. I see myself a little bit in the past here on the live stream. It's kind of freaky. It's kind of freaking me out a bit. Okay. So what makes these resources different is the licensing, right? You can take those resources. If you wanted to take the original PDF file for that chemistry book and distribute it to your students, you can take that PDF file. You have the right to distribute that file to your students. If the Access Center wanted to take the chemistry text, put it into a Word document so that text-to-speech worked better for some students with accommodation, they have the right to just drop that into a Word document. They don't need to ask permission. They don't need to use special tools. They don't need to have any special software to do that. It's openly licensed, and the formats these things are published in are also generally open formats that people can edit and use. It also means if a company wants to come and use this material to build a tool that for students and charge something for that tool, they're allowed to do that under most of these licenses. And it allows companies to come in and provide things like homework tools at a much reduced rate from Pearson or something, McGraw-Hill. Pearson or McGraw-Hill will sell you a textbook, but then you're often locked into their homework tool as well, right? So it's that monopoly power. And it means that you, the faculty member, can take that textbook and you can rewrite it if you want to, either localize it for your class, make it more relevant to your class, or maybe improve or expand it. This keeps the prices down because there's no monopoly power over these materials. And it also keeps the quality up because over time faculty work collectively to improve these materials. I'm going to say a word about cost and a word about the future of OER, and then I'm going to get to our presenters here. First, on the cost issue, I think people often miss the systemic issues around cost because often we look at it and we say, well, it's one $200 textbook. What in the realm of things to worry about, why are we worrying about one $200 textbook for a class or something like that, or a $200 homework tool? To put this in perspective, let's imagine that faculty said, okay, and I had to pick a subject, so I just picked chemistry. I hope I'm not offending anybody in chemistry, but let's say for principles of chemistry, faculty came and they said, look, we want to spend $400,000 a year, every year, on developing course materials for principles of chemistry, okay, above and beyond the cost of faculty, right? And over the next 5 years, this will be $2 million, but it'll be a really great course. You don't have to worry about that. I think administration would think this is crazy. I think faculty would think this is crazy. I think it'd be one of the few things administration and faculty would agree is a bit nuts, right? $2 million for 5 years of a two-course sequence or a one-course sequence just doesn't make sense. We could do so many other things with that money. But this is, in fact, what we are doing. If we take principles of chemistry, we run 1,400 students a year through Chemistry 1. The materials cost $280. That's just under $400,000 a year of student money that we're spending on outsourcing the curriculum of our chemistry course, right? And so when you think about the different ways that money could be spent, it's kind of mind-boggling. Are we getting $400,000 worth of pedagogical value per year out of the use of that textbook? Or are there better ways, are there better uses for this money? And could we maybe reduce costs to students as well? The second thing is about faculty empowerment. We talk a lot about cost because that's the most obvious thing, and it's one thing that I think a lot of people can agree on. But with faculty empowerment, when you go to openly licensed materials, you don't just save money. You put faculty in charge of those materials again. And the open education dream is not doing away with quality materials or you just using something that looks like a textbook but it's open. The open education dream is if we could take a sliver of the millions of dollars that flows to the textbook companies and use that to empower our own faculty to create, maintain, extend, expand, and personalize their own curriculum, what could we do? Like, what could we do as teachers? What could we do as an institution? I'm constantly faced with faculty when I help them with instructional design who want to improve their courses, but there's no money built in the system to give them the time they need to do a real radical overhaul of their courses. And so we rely really, I think, on the charity of faculty in this endeavor because all the money for curriculum development is being shipped elsewhere. The way that Open helps that is we can maybe take a small fraction of that money that goes to textbook and put it back into our institution around developing curriculum and curricular materials. And the other reason is if you think about like that chemistry book or that marketing text, because you can edit that, because you can take pieces of that, you can actually use another person's text as your own basis to start your own text, right? So you don't have to spin up a course from scratch. You can literally mix and match pieces of these different things, write your own materials in the middle of that, and create something new, right? So one example we look at is, well, you have a Principles of Marketing book, you have a hospitality program. Okay, take the Principles of Marketing book and write Principles of Marketing in the hospitality industry, and now you have a textbook, right? But you don't have to write, everything about the power of advertising and stuff from page one. Okay, that's enough of me talking. The final thing I'll just get in is, I think in the broad future, my crazy talk, which no one here has to buy into, is I would love to see a world where our students actually help us co-develop these resources. I think one of the most powerful things students can do is try to explain concepts to others. And so my crazy talk is somewhere in the future, I would like to see not only faculty develop these things, but students help develop modules that explain their own discipline and prepare these students for a professional or a scholarly life where they're going to have to, in turn, explain their discipline to other people. I think it's a great opportunity for that. But that's down the road. So what our panel's going to do is go around. We have certain people here that are presenters. They're mixed incognito into the rest of the crowd. And they're going to talk a little bit about what they teach, the nature of the class they're experimenting, what they're doing with OER, why they're doing it, their biggest challenge and biggest surprise. And after that, it's open questions. If you guys don't come up with questions, I've got some here, but I'm hoping people either on the feed or here will come up with some questions. So let's start with Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Krause. I'm a math instructor here at Washington State, Vancouver. And I've actually used open educational resources in a number of different places. I've done it for 2 upper division courses, and it just happened to be that I included them as part of my book search for those. One of those was a recommendation from Sandy Cooper in the math department in Pullman. She recommended a book, and it looked like a great choice, and so I picked it for 301 was the course, and also for 320. But also our group here in Vancouver, we're using a product, I guess, an open educational resource product called MyOpenMath. And we started that just a few years ago. And that is not only an online textbook, and as in most cases, you can also get a print version of that, but there is also a homework system attached to that, and you can contribute to that homework system as well if you want. So we started using that with our college algebra course. It's expanded to our trigonometry course, so we've eliminated the book for that sequence, that part of our math sequence. We're just now incorporating something into Math 105, which would finish out for the liberal arts math requirement. And I am looking at using an open educational resource in Math 103, a prereq, and that would be as a supplement to a flipped classroom. So I would be doing a hybrid. It would be using an open educational resource in a flipped classroom, and I would just be taking the bits and pieces that I want to use from that.
Great. And now we're going to go to Pullman, talk to Fred and Brian.
We're both teaching the, we have this? Yeah. We're both teaching the algebra-based introductory physics first semester. We each have a section of that. There are 300 students or so for both sections. And this is the second, the class is very challenging for our students. Our students are coming from all kinds of backgrounds for this course. A lot of bio students, pre-med, and a lot of them it's required for their major. This is the second year that in this course we've been using OpenStax text. And so this is the text here. So this is a full year book. So we get through half of this in the first semester. And this is $40 at the bookie if you get a printout. And a lot of the students will be very happy working with a PDF. And there are other aspects to having a PDF that we're going to talk about. Yeah. Let me see. And I should mention, if this is a hefty book. Full year's text for intro physics is usually pretty hefty and will run you about $250 nowadays. Yeah. So latest check. So it's very
standard now.
Yeah. So the students really, a lot of them do like to have the physical book, and so that's nice to have that.
Yeah, the bookie did sell out for all the copies that they had, so students still purchased it. They felt like $40 was a good value for them.
Yeah. And so a couple of other things I want to say. First, let me jump down to say, I must say that if you've been teaching out of a number of proprietary textbooks, you do have to recognize the quality so far is somewhat lower than the proprietary texts. And the comments you get from other people who are trying it out, and we've had Nicholas Cerruti has taught using this book in the spring. Matt McCluskey introduced it with me. And it has a little bit of feeling being written by committee. It's certainly not as slick. And there's a mixed quality of problems the written by committee problem. But it's, the main thing is it is stable. And that's something that you really appreciate as an instructor. You've got this text, you work with it, you can start to optimize your use of it. And that really outweighs, say, the particular slickness of the presentation. Sure. And the other thing I want to say is that the students, I was really surprised at how much they appreciated the savings. They were really grateful for this.
Yeah, and I'd add to that. I have a 19-year-old niece living in Pullman, and she was trying to figure out, does she want to go to WSU? And, it was really a tough choice because she recognized that there are a lot of online college universities now, and one of the big things about that was that the textbook costs were going to put WSU well above the cost of basically any online type of college, online college tuition, which includes the textbooks, which are often kind of online, have an online aspect. So, I think for the student's perspective, it's an important decision they have to make when they have to decide where they're going to go to college, and these pocketbook issues become important for them. Yeah. So one other thing we wanted to just touch on was that you get an advantage to just the other advantages of having an open source textbook is other ways to use it in more creative ways. So what we've been working on is using this in our classroom with it's a text discussion platform. It's called Perusall. It's been developed by Eric Mazur at Harvard, and essentially it's a social media-based platform to allow students to hold discussions over the textbook. or the reading. And they actually even log in with Facebook, Twitter, Google+, etc. And it helps to group them to have discussions with their friends and colleagues. And the way it works is that they highlight different parts of the text that they're either have a question about or want to make a comment, and they create a thread and either pose a question or have a comment. There are replies. There's like buttons, which are the form of a question mark to say, hey, I had that question too. And people who answered it have the possibility of a check mark button that says, hey, that answered my question about this. And on top of that, it has automatic assessment and grading on these comments. And so this is actually, for me, 10% of the class grade that they have these reading assignments every single lecture. And I just included one stat here from one of the reading assignments. This is pretty consistent that I've seen in my section, where participation is about 80%. And so if you think about this, what's going on is about 80% of the students the night before class are reading the sections that I'm going to talk about the night before, and they're discussing it with each other, what they don't understand, trying to help each other with questions. And that's, I think, a real benefit by this, whereby some students maybe can't even afford a textbook, forget about reading the textbook before, and you get so much more out of the class if you have some familiarity with it before the lecture.
Yeah. Let me mention,
Yeah.
I just say, because I've been teaching this for years, and I really did not expect this amount of buy-in. I was staggered just to see these percentages, that people are really using it, and they've read the material. It's really something.
And this is no extra, there's no money involved, it's all free. But the big important thing is you have to have some kind of PDF that you can upload. You can do this with, say, a Pearson textbook or something like that, but in fact, one of our colleagues in the department tried to do this, and Pearson was going to charge even more than the physical textbook for each student to use this. And so really this is something that you can really only use if you have an open source textbook that you're using in class. And I would say even some of the drawbacks of maybe some of the descriptions aren't as good, that actually is useful in this case when that generates discussion amongst the students to really start talking about this and be like, I don't get what are they explaining here? And then somebody comes in, I think they mean this and I think they mean that. So that really helps. And one other thing I wanted to touch on was the fact that it allows something called just-in-time teaching. Many maybe not familiar with that, but basically that allows you to get some feedback from the students in their kind of homework or some kind of assessment between lectures to allow you to assess their level of understanding so that you can adjust your lecture or your discussion in class to enhance that and address some of those problems or questions that they're having. And so what happens is this perusal gives the professor what's called, they call a confusion report. And one example is here is just a screenshot that I made of a lecture that I just did last week, where it's taking their various comments and there's some kind of cluster algorithm to say, okay, well, there's a lot of people asking about this topic or that topic, and so there's like 3 topics. There's people's comments. You can click on the comments, and it brings you to the thread of everybody's discussion, what they said about it. And what we typically do is, first of all, that helps you to identify what you should stress in your class material in the lecture, and also we even take these quotes and put them up on the board or the projector and then discuss some of the real in-depth questions that they have.
It's fantastic. The students recognize, the questions that they've been asking. And when you put them up, they really appreciate that too.
Yeah.
And I should mention also, when I have this screen up and I'm working with this tool sort of on my computer, I've had other faculty members just crowding around. People can't believe it. It's very impressive.
Yeah, there are literally thousands and thousands of posts already in the semester of the couple hundred students that we have.
So I just wanted to bump in.
Yep.
So Mike, hold on. Sorry. This is Ruth Gregory. I'm an emerging technology and multimedia specialist with academic outreach and innovation, and we're actually doing a test with Perusal to see about if we want to bring it wider to campus. So if you're interested in that, anyone, grad students, etc., you'll have the pleasure of reading my master's thesis and commenting on it. Just let me know after this presentation. So now go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fred and Brian. We're gonna move along here, but that's a great example of how using something open allows you to use tools together that otherwise would be impossible for you to use. I want to present Marissa Miranda, who's part of our student government. She's just going to talk a bit about why this is important to student government.
Thank you. So my name is Marissa Miranda. I am a senior this year, majoring in public affairs, minoring in global studies and Spanish. And I am the director of legislative affairs for our school student government. I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to offer the student voice here today. So I am getting involved with OER this year, and I'm really excited that we're starting to make an impact on like a WSU level, because in the past years we have tried to make changes at the state level. Higher education suffered setbacks to accessibility as a result of poor economics since the 2000s, not frequently attributed to the cost of attendance. The cost of course materials also soared. The legislature was able to lower the cost of tuition in 2015, but there's still yet a lot of work to do for the cost of textbooks for students to make it more accessible. Since 2006, I found that the cost of textbooks actually increased by 73%, and some textbooks cost up to $200 to $400. And then the student loan debt is reaching about $1.2 trillion. So it's important to find alternatives to the commercial products, and OER can provide an effective alternative. And it's not only beneficial to the students, but it's also beneficial to faculty and the administration. I would say that last year they made really good efforts. The Director of Legislative Affairs from the different campuses across the state of Washington, they lobby in Olympia to legislators to try to find the types of bills that they want to pass to help Texas be more accessible. Unfortunately, none of the bills passed last year, but as we know, WSU is really taking this project and trying to make an impact here on this level first, and I think that's great. A lot of students try to find their own ways to combat textbook costs. I know there's like a Facebook group where you go and you say, this is a textbook that I bought a year ago that I no longer use. Is anybody willing to buy it? So students are constantly trying to find ways to make it more affordable. And I've also been asked, and I'm very thankful to be part of the textbook steering committee this year. And I think it would be great to start looking at alternatives and how we can start implementing all these things. Last year, the Director of Legislative Affairs made this survey, and he walked around the campus and getting the input from our students here on the Vancouver campus. And we found that 96% of students were willing to pay a $5 to $7 fee in order to take a course that's open material. And 84% would sign up for a course if it clearly stated that it would be offering the open sources. So I think that kind of goes into maybe the biggest challenge that students may face, or the reason that they may have said no on that survey would be because they are concerned maybe about the quality of the material that they would be receiving if they had it. Especially this is more evident with upper division courses, just because they're unsure. And I think like the biggest surprise is really that the textbook publishers get away with charging students exorbitant prices for the books and with no alternative materials. And they've done this for 20 years of a market that was continuing to inflate. So I'm really excited to be part of this initiative, and I'm excited to get input and start contributing to the student voice to this issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Marissa. I'm going to try to turn the camera over here. Bella, we'll see if we can actually do that.
Other way.
There we go.
Hi everyone, I'm Bala Krishnamurthy. I'm a faculty in mathematics. I used to be in the Pullman campus until a few years back, and now I'm in Vancouver. I want to talk about the use of open source software. Of course, I teach math classes. I teach classes from 200 level linear algebra all the way to advanced graduate level classes. We know that mathematics uses either Maple in Pullman or Mathematica here in many of the calculus sequence in the beginning. And then in linear algebra, we switched to MATLAB. We continue the use of that in some of the other advanced classes. I've been using Octave, which is an open source replacement for MATLAB. In fact, the history of Octave is quite given that we were talking about chemistry a lot, it was actually started by someone who wanted an open source tool to study chemical reactions, and now it has branched out. And naturally, MATLAB is a product of a private company with teams working for decades. So they do have a slicker version, but when it comes to, and also lots of packages specifically for special applications. But for most classes, at least up to advanced undergraduate level, and even for some graduate level classes, you can easily switch to Octave. And Python is another open source software which is being used in my own classes. I just give the choice to the students to either use Python or Octave, whichever they are comfortable with. Python is gaining a lot of ground, not just in the academic setting, but also in the industry. These days, if you take any data-oriented job and you start preparing for the job interview, there are actually books telling you how to prepare for the Python questions. Or R is another statistical software which has become quite popular. It has replaced SAS, I would say, in many applications, certainly in the teaching levels. Naturally, there are, at the other end, big industries especially, stick with the high quality code from SAS, proprietary, but they also offer support. So in many cases, that's what they need. They want the support to be able to call someone to fix something immediately if something is not working. But as far as teaching the students the basics of the material as well as the concepts, open source is just as good. And in fact, talking about Mathematica, one of the big powers is symbolic computation. And there's a package or part of Python called SymPy, which is coming along quite nicely. And in fact, I chat with Kevin Cooper, who manages all this in the math department in Pullman. And he was suggesting that in a few years, like maybe even 5 years, SymPy would be just as good as Mathematica, at least for the instructional purposes. So we can just get rid of that. We charge a lot of fees here. In fact, the funny part here is I want to tell the story about Math 220, the linear algebra class. We thought we'll use MATLAB, and we started charging student fees. But we didn't have a lab session. It's only a 2-credit class. We asked the students to do some very little computing on MATLAB, which we make it available on the computers in the labs here. And in Pullman, it's offered through online. But then now we have actually a problem because we started collecting these fees, and we have a course fee balance that's really large, and we cannot really use that money for anything else. We can only use it for providing computational or other kind of assistance for students in that class in the future. And if we move to open source, none of those problems would be there. And naturally, you can, earlier, for instance, the students had to go to a lab in a building to access MATLAB. There was limited support that was made online, but then you really cannot display figures online, for instance. But you can ask the students to download Octave onto their machines and they can run. Same thing with Python. It's open source. It's becoming the industry standard. So you might as well train the students in Python rather than in something else that's proprietary. I don't see any big challenges. Only big challenge is, of course, what is called as legacy code, because we have been teaching something in using Mathematica or Maple. So we have actually developed these lab modules which uses Mathematica. So it will take a lot of effort to rewrite all those modules using SymPy. And naturally, because Mathematica has been there for decades now, they do have some advantages in terms of letting students type in language in English and ask them to plot a complicated math function. So there are some things that goes for that, but at the same time, so maybe because of that, it might be a little bit of a challenge to make students switch. But at the same time, we get complaints from students all the time saying how clumsy Mathematica is. So it's not that they get everything going for them. And typically in schools, in academic settings, we don't go for customer support. So open source is as good. Biggest surprise, I think, is once I ask them to just go download it and do it all by themselves, I actually see, it's not actually a surprise, but I actually see that students actually take it to using them much more than if you require them to actually go to a lab where the licensed software is there. And they can do the homework, at night or over the weekend, especially in Vancouver, where it's a commuter campus. It makes a lot of difference. They really cannot come here in the weekend and expect the lab doors to be open. while in this case they can just do it whenever they want, wherever, it's sitting wherever. So
That's a great example of how it opens up the student use of it too. Students can use it in various ways. So finally, we're going to go to Lily, the biology. Let me see if I can get this. All right, here we go. Lily. Ready for the Zoom?
Don't get too close.
On this Zoom. All right. Willie teaches biology classes here and also has helped us sometimes in professional development around hybrid courses. So tell us what you're doing and why it's important.
Sure. So, as I said, my name is Willie Kushwa. I'm a full-time faculty member at Clark College, which is a local community college, and I've been an adjunct science instructor here for about the last 18 years. I just wanted to kind of work my way down to OERs to mention some other considerations. One of the things that I've learned is shopping for a textbook is something akin to shopping for a car, which is there is now the ability to negotiate. And I've had more experience of this at Clark, but we've worked with publishers and played them against each other and have been able to reduce the cost of textbooks significantly for students. So that's one option. The second option I've used both here at WSU is selecting non-traditional textbooks. And last spring semester, I taught a course on human genetics here. And the two textbooks I used were, the name's not very appealing, but Genetics for Dummies, and then used another book called Genetic Twists of Fate. And both of these books can be obtained for under $20 total, and used copies even cheaper. So that's actually cheaper than a print OER traditional book. My experience with OERs has been, I guess, stimulated predominantly by my work at Clark, a community college. Our students, as well as students at WSU, feel the financial pressures. And so last year, my negotiations with a publisher were breaking down, and I was getting very tired of being constrained by what the publishers felt was the most appropriate content for my students. And the particular class I'm referring to here is Biology of Humans, which I teach it in an online format here at WSU. And so I spent quite a bit of time looking at different possibilities for open education resources, and I too went with the OpenStax option. The problem was OpenStax has a book for biology majors, a book for non-majors, and a book for anatomy and physiology. There is no textbook for human biology. And so what I did was created a book pulling sections from all three of those books, blending them together, and then deleting content that wasn't necessary and inserting content that I found useful for my students. And so this was a major benefit for a couple reasons. First, obviously, cost. The students can obtain a PDF file of the book for free. There is question as to how effectively students read PDF files. That's, I think, a whole nother discussion. But because I elected to use a non-traditional book, the problem became in publishing it, because OpenStax provides their canned books in print format. And so I worked with the folks at OpenStax, and they referred me to AER, Affordable Education Resources, which has worked with OpenStax to custom publish books. And so we were able to get my own book, again, my own, I would say, in the sense of compiled from resources available from OpenStax for the price of $50 or less for the students to purchase as well. So that worked out really well, and that option was much cheaper because it's bound and it has color images included in it, whereas some of the publishing options we looked at said black and white only, and it would still be way more than $50. So the disadvantage in this particular book was, I think the term written by committee was used, but that's where you are able to go in and edit the files and work on phrasing of things, image captions, things like that, to change them to where it really does more reflect the way you want to teach a class. The other thing that was so helpful for me was I was finally able to arrange the chapters in an order in which I like to teach them. And that makes it, for some reason, it's potentially confusing, especially to non-major students, why I'm jumping from chapter 3 to chapter 21. They feel you must be skipping something really important that I need. But now I've been able to change the textbook to where it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's none of the skipping around again as well. So I think the biggest challenge that I faced was learning to use the editing software that OpenStax provides. In my opinion, as a non-computer person, it's difficult. But once you get it figured out, then obviously you're able to move forward with it. So it's been a very positive experience. The students, as was mentioned before, are very happy with the lower cost availability of the book. I think it's a better book for especially non-majors. The challenge, I think, comes with OpenStax is the upper division classes. I teach general genetics here at WSU as well, and I use a traditional textbook in that class because I haven't found anything yet of the quality necessary to teach that particular class that's available as an open education resource. OpenStax is committed to creating books for the 25 most attended college classes. So I don't know how long it would be, but another option would be, with this money that might be saved, is having a committee at WSU create textbooks for upper division classes using OERs. And that might be the funding source for that type of work.
Thanks a lot. See if we
Actually,
can.
can I ask a question? Here, there are two parts. Class, which is blending compilation of 3 different OpenStax classes. How many person days did that take you to do? And secondly, what proportion of that was done prior to the first day of class? How much of it was done throughout the course of the semester?
Yeah, that's a great question, and this is going to be one of the biggest stumbling blocks. I think you used the word charity. I wasn't paid for doing this. I'm not talking about WSU necessarily having to provide the payment, because I work at Clark too, and there were no funds available for doing that. It came mainly out of my frustration. It was a way to get back at the publisher. Maybe that was it. I was venting to do that. It involved almost 2.5 months worth of work, and the work was done prior to the start of the course because I had to have the book bound. So all of that was done before I ever got to the class, but it took a little over 2 months to do the whole process.
Are there questions from Pullman for any of the presenters? If you don't remember the names of the presenters, just tell us the subject.
Well, I know it sounds like lots of people can contribute materials to these open educational things, but there must be some kind of an editor that gets to pick and choose what content goes into these resources, right? I mean, how does that process work? It's not a Wikipedia thing. So.
Maybe I could talk about how Lumen Learning and my
Yeah, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, so I think it's actually fairly different depending on the resource. So this is again Paul Krause, I'm in math, and when I did the 2 that were upper division textbooks, those were actually just textbooks whose copyright had reverted to the author, and they decided to make those available. And then materials got developed in second revisions, and that was essentially how that was done. MyOpenMath is something a little bit different because it's actually Lumen Learning is the parent company, and they will collect open educational resources and curate them, and they've also created a homework system that goes with it. And so in that case, you actually do, and I think this is somewhat rare in the open educational world, where you have folks who are dedicated to grouping those individual efforts in making self-published or open educational resources and grouping them and packaging them into courses. So under the auspices of Lumen Learning, I think there's biology, there's a whole range of subjects that are there. We've been using it in math and in also using the homework system. And to address what Willie said about the donation of time and charity, we did look to get some support to launch this effort. And so the first time we incorporated MyOpenMath, it was during the school year, and we did have some support for that faculty member who did that. And as we've expanded to trigonometry and other things, quick start guides for other faculty, because you don't want that effort to end with the faculty who's been working with it. You want to make it easier for other faculty or adjuncts to make it. So we have had some level of support, and it's been through the College of Arts and Sciences, and it's usually been around the level of like a small course in terms of support for a one-time cost per semester.
Great. Are there some questions from I want to make sure that we're equally serving each side here. There's some questions from Vancouver. Anybody hear something that? Oh, come on, Vancouver people, represent. Is anyone from Pullman that has a question about anything?
My name is Lisa Carloy, and we're here in Pullman. So
we're going to start. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go
so
ahead.
my question is for our student rep. I hear different prices for these OpenStack books. You know, $40, $50. What is a price point for students that makes a book be too expensive or expensive? I mean, how does that feel? I mean, $50 still seems kind of expensive, but it's not $200. So what do students think is expensive?
Right, and when you mentioned the $50, I did think about a full-time student. It could be a total of $200 to $250 for a course, which I would say is a lot more affordable. I mean, that's the cost of one textbook for some students. It's the reality for them. But I mean, when I go around and talk to the students, like, what are your issues with higher education? Like, what could you change if you could? And it's always affordability and just making it affordable as possible. And like tuition is its own amount of money. And so textbook costs on top of that it's a lot more. So I did the Running Start program at Clark College. I took my last 2 years of high school at Clark College. And when I was at Clark, it was paid through my high school because that's kind of the system, but I still had to pay for my textbooks. And as a high school student, not working, it was a lot of money for me to, even $50, to get $50 was a lot of money. And to think that students that are just entering college automatically have a job right off the bat and have the amount of money to be putting towards immense amount of money for textbooks, I would say $50, $100 is a lot of money for students. I agree, it's definitely a lot better than spending $200 for one textbook. But I think we were really trying to reach that goal where we have the open source material and maybe students are able to pay a fee. I really like the idea of students being able to help create the material. It can be a collaborative effort. But I mean, to give you one price range to speak for all of the students, I don't think that. I think that would be a little difficult, but yeah.
I could answer one element of that question, which as far as the OpenStack's physical copies, what OpenStack has told us is about 10 to 15% of students make use of them, right? And the rest of the students make use of the PDFs. So what you find is that the students that are more price sensitive, right, just make use of the PDF versus the textbook. The students that are maybe a little less price sensitive or a little more, of a printophile, grab the textbook. So I think giving the students options around that is a good idea. I'll also say that where students' price sensitivity is can depend on major as well. So I often talk to people, faculty even, who are like, well, what's the problem with textbooks? I'm in English. We buy about $40 worth of textbooks. Well, yeah, and maybe in English, maybe in a liberal arts seminar class, that's what happens. They're unaware that students can spend $350 just getting materials for a biology course, right? So the students in the sciences, I know, just from some analysis that we've done, we look at averages and we talk, well, the average student spends about $1,200 on textbooks. That's average, right? We have students that are spending in excess of that. In the sciences, that first set of classes that students do, if there's homework tools involved, you're looking at really substantial numbers. So their sensitivity to a $50 option is going to be a little less than students say in the humanities.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm Ellen Rogers, and I'm a adjunct instructor in the public affairs program, and I was wondering what kind of recommendations you have for disciplines where there isn't a lot of OER.
Yeah.
And the online resources are really either aimed at high school students, like I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill kind of things, or like I teach state and local government, and there's one political science open textbook, and it's American national politics.
Yeah.
So are there and teaching, especially teaching undergrads only with research, journals, articles, and things like that? It's a different beast.
Yeah.
So any recommendations for
So
disciplines?
my heart bleeds for you every day. I know you came to me like last year, and you said, "Is there a resource on state and local government?" And stupidly, I said, well, state and local government. I mean, that's a really important topic. There must be something.
I'm sure.
And then I went out and I spent 3 days looking for something, and there's really nothing. There's some American government stuff, but it's like you said, it's not dealing with the local government and the tensions and all the things that you deal with in your class. The only answer we have now for those classes is we're starting up a partnership with WSU libraries, and we're trying to, in conjunction with a bunch of people around the country, do a better job of cataloging what's out there. And do a better job of sharing the resource packs that various institutions put together, right? So we're not the only institution doing this. There's many, many institutions. And some things that haven't made it yet to textbook form, if we can find the right person at the right institution that's compiled that set of resources that are keyed towards that, that might be a usable thing. And so that's new that we're working with the library. I know Linda can maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, for this and for Jeanette, I mean, stuff is coming online every day, lots of stuff. And I mean, we just have to kind of keep looking, but everybody's dealing with it. And, so, I mean, I guess I'd say talk to your librarian, let us help you look for this stuff so you don't have to thrash through everything.
I traditionally use traditional textbooks, and so what I did this semester is I personally, with my own money, bought copies of my textbooks and I put them in the library. I figured if students had no access to paying for a textbook, at least there was an available resource in the library.
The one other thing I would say is I think a lot of people, both whether it's today or whether it was 2 years ago, took a look at what was out there and kind of assumed that resources were static. And it's an area that's moving very fast. So if you looked at the resources that were available to you 3 years ago and thought, this is not workable, the things that were not workable 3 years ago are workable. The things that were workable but not quite 3 years ago are now polished. That's the general trajectory of these things. So please keep checking back. I do see that we're at 12:58. So I don't know if there's an official, like someone has to do an official closing.
We do have a representative from the libraries here, so I just wanted to give her a chance to talk about how they can help support you.
Yeah, I'll just say really quickly, because there were a couple of things brought up about especially the time involved in locating these resources and remixing them and so on. And one thing I did want to mention is in this next year, we're offering grants in partnership with Academic Outreach and Innovation that are meant to try and help with that process. So if it's something that you're interested in, we're trying to have things in place for you so that you can explore. One thing that we're providing is an opportunity to review an open resource that's out there, an open textbook. And then over the next summer, 2017, we're providing some grants for people who want to look at incorporating OERs into their classes. So that's just the one thing that I would like to mention. And of course, I want to back up the comment about ask your librarian, because we are very eager to help support this as well.
Also say there's another set of grants on the Vancouver campus for working with the library. And if you have any questions about any of this, there is now an email, oer@wsu.edu, where if you're interested in what grants might be available, what the timeline on those are, or if you just want to be put in contact with someone that can help you choose something for your class or integrate it, if you mail to that, we'll get it to the person that can help you most. So oer@wsu.edu.
Wow. So Thank you to everyone for coming to this really interesting discussion with so many resources. Feel free to clap for our presenters. I feel like there was a lot of different things mentioned that could be of use to everyone in the room. So make sure that you signed in or checked in with Margie and she got your email address. And I'll send out a follow-up email trying to aggregate all of this great information and opportunities to work more with OERs. So thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you at our next faculty-led workshop. Our training schedule and faculty-led workshop schedule for fall is also on the table as you leave too, so make sure to grab one of those.